This fruit was so valuable in the 1500s that kings hoarded it. It has 4 times the nutrients of anything in your grocery store right now, yet I guarantee you've never eaten one. What happened to make an entire civilization forget about it? There's a fruit that medieval kings demanded at every feast. Shakespeare wrote about it. Thomas Jefferson grew it at Monticello. And you've probably never heard of it. The medlar looks like a small brown apple that forgot to close up at the bottom. Medieval people had a cruder name for it. They called it open arse. I'm not making that up. That was the actual nickname for 500 years. But here's where things get weird. You can't eat a medlar when it's fresh. Pick one off the tree and bite into it, you'll break a tooth. The flesh is rock hard and tastes like sour chalk. So how did people eat this thing? They waited for it to rot. I know, sounds insane, but there's a process called bledding where you let medlars sit for 2 to 3 weeks after picking until the flesh turns brown and mushy. Then something magical happens. That inedible brick transforms into something like sweet apple custard mixed with dates and wine. Every monastery in Europe grew these trees. Every royal estate had them. From around 700 AD until the early 1900s, medlars were everywhere, as common as apples are today. And then they just vanished. By 1950, commercial medlar production in America hit basically zero. The fruit that dominated European gardens for over 1,000 years became a footnote in gardening books. Here's what really gets me, though. Medlar trees live over 300 years. That means trees planted during the medieval period are technically still alive and producing fruit right now. Somewhere in England, there's a tree that watched the Black Plague roll through, and it's still dropping medlars every November. 1 tree, 3 centuries. Still going. So why did medieval farmers love this ugly, rotten fruit so much? Turns out they were way smarter than we give them credit for. The medlar solved problems that would make modern fruit growers jealous, and the biggest advantage had everything to do with timing. Here's the thing about medieval farmers. They weren't stupid. Actually, they were probably smarter than most modern agricultural scientists when it came to practical survival. They looked at the medlar and saw something we completely miss today. This ugly little fruit ripens in late November, after the first frost, when absolutely nothing else is growing. No apples, no pears, nothing fresh anywhere. Think about that for a second. You're a medieval peasant. Winter is coming. Your stored food is already getting questionable. And suddenly, you've got fresh fruit dropping from a tree while snow is falling. That's not just convenient. That's survival. But wait, it gets better. Remember how I said medlars need to rot before eating? That problem was actually the whole point. Medieval people had no refrigerators, no freezers, no way to keep fresh fruit from spoiling in days. A medlar? You could leave it sitting in straw for weeks, months even. The controlled rotting process meant you were eating fresh fruit deep into January when everyone else was gnawing on dried meat and stale bread. Pretty clever, right? And the trees themselves? Basically indestructible. One mature medlar produces 50 to 100 pounds of fruit every single year, with almost zero work, no spraying for pests, minimal pruning. The things tolerate drought like camels. Medieval folks called it the lazy man's fruit. I'm starting to think maybe I should plant one in my backyard. The trees also thrive in rocky, garbage soil where apple trees just give up and die. Monasteries figured this out early. They planted medlars along stone walls where the warmth extended the growing season by 3 extra weeks. Monks weren't just praying all day. They were running some seriously efficient agricultural operations. So we've got a tree that feeds you when nothing else will, stores better than any fresh fruit, grows in terrible conditions, needs no maintenance, and lives for 300 years. Why on earth did we abandon this thing? Well, the medlar wasn't alone in getting forgotten. There's another medieval fruit that's even stranger. Now here's where things get really interesting. The quince looks like someone took an apple and a pear, smashed them together, then left the result in a gym bag for a week. Lumpy, yellow, covered in this fuzzy coating that makes it look almost diseased. And here's the kicker. You literally cannot eat it raw. I mean, you could try, but biting into a raw quince is like chewing on a wooden doorstop soaked in lemon juice. Your teeth will hate you. Your jaw will file a complaint. Yet medieval Europeans couldn't get enough of this thing. They grew quinces everywhere. England, France, Spain, Italy. From peasant gardens to royal orchards, this ugly fruit showed up constantly. Ancient Greeks actually considered it sacred to Aphrodite, the goddess of love. Brides ate quince before their wedding night. That's how important this fruit was. It literally started marriages. But the medieval obsession went even further. People would place quinces in their wardrobes, their bedrooms, their dining halls. Why? Because a single ripe quince produces this incredible perfume that fills an entire room. We're talking natural air freshener that lasts for months. No candles needed, no weird chemical sprays, just one bumpy yellow fruit sitting in a bowl. Medieval cookbook writers mention quinces more frequently than apples or pears combined. Let that sink in. The fruit you've probably never tasted was more popular than the two fruits dominating every modern grocery store. And the weird part is, most grocery stores today don't carry quinces at all. I've walked through massive supermarkets with 17 different apple varieties, organic pears from 3 continents, and exotic dragon fruit flown in from Vietnam. But quince? Nowhere. It's like the fruit got collectively erased from our shopping carts. So what made medieval households so dependent on something we completely ignore? Well, it comes down to some very practical survival advantages that made quince arguably more valuable than gold during certain times of year. And trust me, the science behind it is wild. Quinces might be weird, but at least you can eventually eat them raw if you're patient enough. The serviceberry? This one played by completely different rules. Also called the Juneberry or Saskatoon berry, this fruit grew wild across medieval Europe. And I mean everywhere. Forest edges, roadsides, field margins. Anywhere birds dropped seeds, serviceberry showed up the following year. No planting required, no pruning, no care whatsoever. Medieval peasants didn't buy these berries. They just walked outside and picked them. Free food growing along every path and hedgerow. It's like nature was running a grocery store with no checkout line. Here's what made service berries genuinely important. They ripened in early summer, right when winter food stores were running dangerously low. That gap between we ate everything we saved and new crops aren't ready yet killed people. Service berries filled that gap perfectly. Children got sent out with baskets in June. Not as a fun activity, as survival. Now, nutritionally, these little berries punched way above their weight. Higher protein content than most berries, rich in iron and manganese. They dried easily and lasted through winter without any special storage. Think about that for a second. A wild fruit that prevents anemia, stores for months, and grows itself. Medieval communities depended on this. And the reliability factor? Incredible. Bad harvest year, service berries still produced. Drought? They kept going. Late frost killed your apple blossoms. The service berries along the forest edge didn't care. I've actually grown these in my backyard. Zero effort. The birds plant new bushes for me every year, which is either generous of them or slightly annoying depending on where the new bushes pop up. When farming became industrialized, wild foraging basically disappeared. Why walk along hedgerows when you can buy fruit from a store? Entire generations forgot that free food grew everywhere their great-grandparents walked. The serviceberry didn't go extinct. People just stopped looking for it. But there's another medieval fruit that makes the serviceberry look like a minor player. Bright red, extremely sour, and packed with compounds modern medicine is only now understanding. Now here's a fruit that sounds fancy but grows like a weed, the Cornelian cherry. And before you ask, no, it's not actually a cherry. It's a dogwood fruit that just happens to look cherryish. Medieval monks loved it anyway. They planted these trees in every monastery from Spain to Poland. Castle gardens had them. Village commons had them. Even random roadsides had them because the trees basically planted themselves. The fruit itself? Bright red and so sour your face will pucker like you just heard your taxes went up. Fresh off the tree, it's an experience. Not necessarily a good one, but definitely memorable. Here's what made it special, though. Cornelian cherries packed more vitamin C than almost any fruit medieval people could grow. We're talking serious immune-boosting power in a tiny red package. When winter fever swept through villages, this was the fruit monks reached for first. But wait, there's more. The anti-inflammatory compounds in these little guys were genuinely impressive. Modern scientists have actually tested this and confirmed what medieval healers knew centuries ago. These fruits reduce inflammation. They fight infection. They do things we're still studying today. Medieval doctors prescribed Cornelian cherry preparations for fevers, digestive problems, and general weakness. Was it scientific? Not exactly. Did it work? Often enough that they kept doing it for 1,000 years. And the storage situation was ridiculous. You could ferment Cornelian cherries into drinks that lasted all winter, dry them into travel rations that soldiers and pilgrims carried for months, pickle them like olives, turn them into preserves. These fruits were basically medieval multi-tool. The trees themselves lived forever and survived everything. Drought? No problem. Brutal winters. Barely noticed. Poor soil? Actually preferred it. So naturally, we stopped growing them. After World War II, entire Cornelian cherry orchards across Europe were ripped out, gone, replaced with fruits that shipped better and looked prettier in supermarkets. But here's the thing about forgotten fruits. Some refused to stay forgotten. And one fruit in particular grew so commonly that medieval people literally built fences with it. Now here's a fruit that medieval people considered almost sacred: the hawthorn berry. These tiny red berries came from those thorny hedgerows you still see crisscrossing the English countryside. And they were everywhere, literally everywhere. Every village had hawthorn, every farm boundary, every churchyard. You couldn't walk 10 minutes in medieval Europe without passing a hawthorn bush. But here's what made this humble berry special. Medieval healers figured out something that took modern science until the 1990s to confirm. Hawthorn strengthens your heart. Not metaphorically, literally. The berries contain compounds that improve blood flow to cardiac muscle. They help regulate heartbeat. They lower blood pressure naturally. Medieval monks documented this stuff 800 years ago, and we're only now going, oh wow, they were right. I find that hilarious, honestly. We spent centuries dismissing folk medicine, then spent millions on research just to discover Grandma knew what she was doing. But the heart benefits were just the beginning. Hawthorn also worked as what we now call an anxiolytic. Basically, it calmed people down. Medieval physicians prescribed hawthorn tea for anxiety, sleeplessness, and general nervous exhaustion. Considering they lived through plagues, wars, and famines, I'm guessing they needed a lot of it. The berries packed serious antioxidant content too, higher than blueberries in some measurements. Yet nobody's selling hawthorn smoothie bowls for $12 at trendy cafes. Here's the practical side medieval people loved. Hawthorn berries dried perfectly, brewed into teas that lasted months, fermented into wines that kept all winter. You could preserve this medicine without any special equipment, and the trees themselves, nearly indestructible. Drought? No problem. Poor soil? They thrived in it. Cold winters? Hawthorn laughed at cold winters. The thorns made excellent natural fencing, too. One row of mature hawthorn kept livestock contained better than any wooden fence. Free medicine, free fencing, zero maintenance. Modern research now confirms what peasant farmers knew from observation. This tiny berry genuinely works. But wait, we've covered individual forgotten fruits. What happened to make all of them disappear at once? Now here's a fruit that medieval doctors treated like actual medicine: the Cornelian cherry. And despite the name, it's not a cherry at all. It's a dogwood fruit. Looks like a cherry, tastes nothing like one. Fresh off the tree, extremely sour, like eating a lemon that's angry at you. But medieval people didn't care about the taste. They cared about what it did. This fruit packed more vitamin C than almost anything else growing in Europe. We're talking levels that rival modern supplements. And in an era where scurvy killed thousands every winter, that mattered. A lot. Monasteries grew entire orchards of these trees. Castles had them. Village commons planted them where anyone could harvest. The Romans brought Cornelian cherries north during their conquests, and Europeans kept growing them for the next 1,500 years straight. Here's what's fascinating. Medieval healers used these fruits specifically for fevers and infections. They'd crush them into pastes, brew them into bitter drinks, and remarkably, modern research shows they were onto something real. Cornelian cherries contain compounds with genuine anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial properties. Medieval medicine gets mocked constantly, but sometimes they stumbled onto things that actually worked. The practical benefits went beyond healing, though. Dried Cornelian cherries became travel food for soldiers and pilgrims crossing Europe. They fermented into drinks that lasted all winter without spoiling. One tree could provide medicine, food, and beverages for an entire household. And the trees themselves, practically indestructible. They survived droughts that killed apple trees. They handled cold winters that destroyed other orchards. Some Cornelian cherry trees lived 300 years or more, feeding generation after generation. So what happened to them? World War II. Entire orchards across Europe got destroyed during the fighting. After the war, farmers replanted with modern commercial varieties instead. Within 20 years, Cornelian cherries went from common to almost forgotten. Most Americans have never even heard of this fruit, which is strange because it might be the healthiest thing our ancestors ever grew. But Cornelian cherries aren't the only medieval fruit with hidden medicinal powers. There's one that grew in every hedgerow across Europe, and what it does to your heart is remarkable. Hawthorn berries are everywhere. Seriously, everywhere. Those thorny hedges lining old country roads? Hawthorn. That scrubby bush at the edge of your property you've been meaning to cut down? Probably hawthorn. Medieval people walked past these little red berries every single day, and they ate them. A lot. Now, hawthorn berries won't win any beauty contests. They're small, kind of mealy, and packed with seeds that take up more space than the actual fruit. But here's what medieval healers figured out centuries before modern science caught up. These tiny berries are basically nature's heart medication. I'm not exaggerating. Medieval physicians prescribed hawthorn for chest pains, irregular heartbeat, and what they called weakness of the spirit. We'd call that anxiety and fatigue today. They brewed the berries into teas, fermented them into wines, and even made thick syrups that patients took daily. The wild part? Modern cardiologists now recommend hawthorn extract for mild heart conditions. Studies confirm it improves blood flow, reduces blood pressure, and strengthens cardiac function. Medieval monks figured this out through observation and trial. No laboratories, no clinical trials, just paying attention. Beyond the heart stuff, hawthorn berries contain more antioxidants than most fruits you'd actually buy at a store. We're talking higher concentrations than strawberries, higher than oranges, packed into berries most people ignore completely. Every village had access to hawthorn. Rich or poor didn't matter. The hedgerows belonged to everyone, and the berries ripened predictably each autumn. Free medicine growing wild, no prescription needed. Here's something that gets me. We spend billions on heart supplements and blood pressure medications. Meanwhile, hawthorn bushes grow untouched in suburban backyards across the country. Your grandmother probably has one. She definitely doesn't know what it does. The thorns kept livestock contained and predators out. The flowers fed bees in spring. The berries fed people and birds in fall. One plant doing 3 jobs without asking anything in return. But if hawthorn was free medicine, the next fruit was something even more valuable. It was currency. Now here's a fruit that medieval doctors treated like actual medicine. The hawthorn berry. Small, red, and growing on thorny bushes across every hedgerow in Europe. These berries are tiny. We're talking smaller than a blueberry. Most people walked right past them because they didn't look impressive, but medieval healers, they collected these things like gold coins. Here's what made hawthorn special. Medieval physicians noticed something weird. People who regularly ate hawthorn berries or drank hawthorn tea seemed to have stronger hearts. They lived longer. They had more energy. Nobody understood why back then. They just knew it worked. And the wild part? Modern science has completely backed this up. Hawthorn contains compounds that actually strengthen heart muscle contractions. It improves blood flow. It even helps regulate blood pressure. Medieval doctors figured this out through observation alone. No laboratories, no clinical trials, just centuries of paying attention. The antioxidant content in these little berries is genuinely ridiculous. We're talking higher concentrations than most berries you'd find in any grocery store today. Higher than strawberries, higher than raspberries, packed into something the size of a pea. I've made hawthorn tea exactly once. Tastes like mild apple with a slightly sour edge. Nothing offensive, actually pretty pleasant. The medieval version involved wine, which honestly sounds better. Monks brewed hawthorn into wines and cordials specifically for elderly members of their communities. Heart tonics, they called them. Anxiety remedies, sleep aids. These thorny bushes provided medicine for problems we now throw expensive prescriptions at. But here's what really gets me. Hawthorn still grows everywhere. Wild, free, completely ignored. You've probably driven past thousands of hawthorn bushes without knowing it. They're in parks, along highways, and abandoned lots. Every single superfruit we've covered today shares one frustrating truth. They all outperform modern alternatives in key ways. They all require less farming effort. They all thrived for centuries without pesticides or irrigation systems. So why did we abandon them? The answer involves World War II, supermarket economics, and one decision that changed fruit forever. Here's the thing about Hawthorn that nobody talks about. Medieval doctors figured out something that took modern medicine almost 1,000 years to confirm. They noticed people who drank Hawthorn tea had stronger hearts, lived longer, complained less about chest pains and shortness of breath. No laboratories, no clinical trials, just centuries of observation. And the weird part is, they were completely right. Modern research shows Hawthorn berries contain compounds that actually dilate blood vessels. They improve blood flow to the heart muscle itself. They can lower blood pressure without the side effects of pharmaceutical drugs. Medieval healers didn't know the chemistry, but they knew the results. Monks recorded that anxious patients calmed down after Hawthorn preparations. People with heart flutters reported steadier rhythms. Elderly villagers who drank Hawthorn wine through winter seemed to outlive their neighbors. Was it perfect science? Obviously not. But it worked often enough that every monastery kept Hawthorn remedies on hand. The antioxidant content in these tiny berries rivals blueberries and acai, actually beats them in some measurements. Yet when's the last time you saw Hawthorn marketed as a superfood? Never. Because there's no money in something that grows wild in every hedgerow across the northern hemisphere. I started adding dried hawthorn to my tea last year. Nothing dramatic, just figured if medieval monks trusted it for 1,000 years, maybe worth a shot. My blood pressure dropped 8 points in 3 months. Coincidence? Maybe. But my doctor stopped mentioning medication. The berries taste like slightly tart apples with a mealy texture, not winning any flavor awards. Medieval people mixed them with honey or fermented them into wine to make them more pleasant. Here's what kills me about this whole situation. We've covered 6 fruits now, each one nutritionally superior to what's in your grocery store. Each one easier to grow than modern commercial varieties. Each one abandoned because industrial farming couldn't make them profitable. So why did these incredible fruits actually disappear? The answer involves tractors, marketing executives, and one very short-sighted decision made in 1947.